iCAT05 is the fifth mock in our national level test series comprising 25 mocks. Now, as you know, all these mocks are designed based on the lines of CAT 2016, 15, depending on various inputs that we received from our experts and students. Hence, based on these inputs, each mock has a different difficulty level. So, iCAT5 is designated as an easy to moderate mock, bordering closer to moderate than to easy. If you look at iCAT5, you will notice that the average difficulty level of this mock is approximately 1.88. Now, obviously, this is something which is more of an internal nomenclature, but if I would tell you that each question can be LOD, that is level of difficulty 1, which is easy, 2, which is moderate, or 3, which is difficult. So this mock is marginally less than difficult. What we'll do now, and before I go into that, I would say that the ideal attempts for this mock should have been somewhere in the mid to late 50s. So somewhere from 55 to 60. Obviously, any attempts that I tell you right now are dependent on an accuracy of at least 90%. If you have say 65 attempts, 70 attempts, your accuracy could go down, but your scores could also go down proportionately. So you need to focus more on accuracy, which is at least 85 to 90%, and then look at having approximately 54 to 55 attempts at the bare minimum. 58 would be a good number. Now, let us look at each section in greater detail. So, just as the CAT exam starts with English or the verbal ability section, let me also start with this section. Like always, we had 5 RC sets. However, what we did as a variant in this is that we changed the composition of these RC sets to give you 21 questions. Typically, CAT will give you 24. We also put in 24 in a lot of mocks, but this was more as a practice. What if this happens? And there were 13 numerical entry questions where you had to enter the answer in the box provided. So this marginally also led to the difficulty level of this section being the highest in this mock. The average difficulty level of this section was 2.0, which is essentially what can be called perfectly moderate. So what were the RCs? Let me first start with the RCs that we had in this section. There were 3 reasonably doable RCs. One was on formal and informal economy, one was on hypnosis, and one was on addiction. Addiction of not only substance abuse along with social media. So these 3 were the ones which were RCs that could be called easy to moderate or moderate, and these were the ones that should have definitely been attempted. The questions in most RCs, just like you would encounter in CAT, were inferential in nature with 1 or 2 semi-factual questions thrown in. But if you would have read these RCs carefully and then tried to solve these questions, I am pretty sure that you would have been able to attempt 10 to 11 of the 12 questions present in these 3 RCs. The remaining 2 RCs were on theories of science and linguistics or languages. These were typically more difficult, especially the one on theory of sciences. I would not have attempted these RCs even as a student or as a faculty. Yes, as a faculty it becomes a nice challenge to attempt a tough RC, but this is not something that should have been looked at in the exam. So typically for the RCs, 11 to 10 attempts out of 12, good. Let's move on to the non-RC questions. So we had 13 questions in this mock. They were split across 5 different chapters, which means that you had 3 questions on pure jumbled sentences, 3 questions on the jumbled sentence variety typical to CAT, which is the contextual odd man out questions. Then you had 2 questions on word usage, 2 questions on sentence correction, and 3 questions on paragraph summary. The questions on jumbled sentences, word usage, and sentence correction, which means questions that involved a lot of verbal reasoning and grammar, were reasonably doable. Those on odd man out were typically difficult because the question type itself is very challenging. Paragraph summary could or could not have been attempted based on your expertise with that particular topic. But generally, as we say in CAT prep, that because numerical entry questions do not have negative marks, you could have gone and marked ahead any answer for these 13 questions. Yes, on a more serious note, 7 questions would have been a good decent attempt for this entire section. So if I look at this, I would say 18 attempts would have been reasonably achievable, but 16 would be a bare minimum. So, having looked at the English or verbal ability section, let us now move on to the big challenge that people face in CAT, which is the DILR section. DILR typically is the most difficult section that you would encounter in CAT. So, in this section, what typically happens is that you have 8 sets. The big challenge that CAT has compared to its earlier versions is that there is no fixed DI and no fixed LR. You might see a question that is tabular, but it's totally LR based. You might see a caselet which looks like an LR set but is more of a data interpretation set, etc. Secondly, the other challenge starting from last year is that a set may have a mix of MCQ and any question. So you need to be prepared for that. So typically we say that you need to have 4 to 5 sets attempted in the mock. So generally, irrespective of the difficulty level, we would say 16 to 20 attempts is a great performance. Even in this, I would say 18 attempts would have been good. But let me list down the sets that you should have definitely attempted. The first set in the paper, which was on scheduling of lectures, was by far the easiest of the entire mock and definitely should have been attempted. This was more a kind of set that you would have seen in, say, an IFT or a SNAP or an MNCT. So I'm not saying that it was easy, but it was easier compared to the other sets. So you should have attempted this. Then there was a set on line graph where you had cars being produced in Chennai. Again, this was a set which was doable. This should have been attempted. Then there was a set on nights and names, which was the last set of this mock, where you had 3 people making a couple of statements or 3 statements. Again, this was something that you should have attempted. I know that people do tend to have a slight tendency to worry about nights and names questions, but this was actually easy. So you would have been at a loss had you not attempted this question. Then there were 2 borderline sets. One was on mutual funds on bar graphs. This was easy to moderate. Some questions could have been attempted, some you could have left. I probably would have done the whole set, but I would say borderline. And similarly, you had one set on tables, which was a combination of percentages and Venn diagrams, which was on people trained in .NET and Java. Again, because it was combination of Venn and percentages, people do get scared on application of Venn, but this was attemptable. So on the whole, these 5 sets is what you should have really looked at. 3 sets could have been attempted in full, that is scheduling, cars in Chennai and nights and names. 2 sets could have been attempted at least half, which was the one on .NET and Java and one on mutual funds. So that would have taken your attempts down to or up to 18 questions. The 3 other sets, the big challenge of this section really was that the 3 toughest sets looked like the sets that you should have attempted. For example, there was one set on weight of or age of 9 people and you had to find the sum and all those things. This was actually a slightly more difficult set than what you would have been expected. But looking at the language of the set, the student would definitely have attempted this. Similarly, there was a set on 4 couples and the game that they play at different hours. Again, this was something which could have been difficult, could have been solved with some time left, yes, but in an exam scenario, I wouldn't have attempted it. As a good practice question after the exam, must attempt. The last set which you could have skipped was the one on the football tournament. People do tend to solve these. So here again people are divided into 2 categories. You have somebody who is either good at it and can solve it, or people who find tournament based questions very difficult. So they would have left it. So these three ideally would have been left by most people. So 5 sets that should have been attempted and 3 sets that could have been left. 18 questions in all. Finally, moving to what is generally considered the easiest section of CAT, which is maths. Now, for a lot of non-engineers, this might come as a surprise, but since the last 2 years, maths has been the easiest section in CAT. Even if you look at the maths of this particular paper, the QA section had an average LOD of somewhere around 1.68 to 1.7, which is much lower than the average LOD of the other 2 sections, which was closer to 2. Typically, again, in CAT, you will see that there are anyways between 9 to 12 questions which are sitters in the quant section. Even in this paper, there were 10 questions which could have straight away been attempted in the paper. And this is the biggest challenge in QA, as to you need to identify that these A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. questions need to be attempted. So what were these questions? And I'll start listing them down. So you had questions, there was a chunk at questions 74, 76 and 78 from number theory, percentages and ratio proportion. So all 3 of them were reasonably easy, definitely should have been attempted. Then there was another chunk from 87 to 92. So questions 87, 88, 90, 92 and 94. So if you look at it in a span of 8 questions from 87 to 94, you have 5 reasonably easy questions. So this entire span would have got you a lot of marks. What were these areas? You had mixtures and allegations, PNC, coordinate geometry, percentages and circles. So again, a lot of arithmetic and geometry, which would have got you these marks. Then 99 and 100 was a set, a small set on time and work. But again, this was reasonably easy. So this is one way in which the examiner can trick you, where they hide an easy question right at the end. And if you notice, your question number in QA starts from 69. So the halfway mark here is at question number 68 plus 17, that's at say 84, or so it will be around 84 or 85. So if you see, the easiest questions were in the second half of the entire set or the entire section. So that is something you need to keep in mind. Sometimes the section as a whole might not be difficult, but the first part or the last part might be difficult. If you look at the first 6 questions of this section, you will see that they are very wordy questions, even though they might not be very difficult. You might actually start wondering whether you are taking an IFT test or a CAT test. But only the first 4 or 5 were this wordy. The remaining were typical CAT questions. So this was an attempt to again confuse you for a short while as to what is the style of this paper. But typically these 10 questions definitely should have been attempted. Then there were approximately 8 to 9 other questions which were easy to moderate. I have not listed them down here because easy to moderate questions typically tend to depend on the person's grasp of that chapter. So what I find easy may not exactly be easy for you. But those could have been attempted. There were a few tough questions unambiguously. So there was one of a circle on top of a cube and something on functions, and those 2-3 questions which were definitely questions that you should have missed. But on the whole, I would say that 20 questions is what you could have easily attempted in the entire section. So to summarize, iCAT05 was an easy to moderate test, bordering closer to moderate. VA was the toughest section in this, but you could have attempted 16 questions with 3 RCs. DILR was close to VA in terms of difficulty, but you could have attempted 3 full sets and 2 half sets. Maths or QA was the easiest. You could have easily attempted 19 to 20 questions. On the whole, I would say anywhere between 55 to 60 attempts would be a good performance as far as this paper is concerned. Thank you and wish you all the best for CAT.